Tonight on the Daily Debrief, new recordings of the man who admitted murdering his family.
I put my hands around my wife's neck.
Find out what he told investigators about the deaths of his wife and children.
What about the girls?
And 3 Chicago cops accused of a cover-up in the fatal shooting of a black teen.
The long history of the Code of Silence is finally being exposed.
Plus, an escape from a deadly attack and a sentence for the convicted double killer. Also, a $74,000 legal dispute over this rapper's wardrobe. It's all straight ahead on the Daily Debrief for Friday, November 30th. All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Debrief for this Friday. New interrogation recordings are out tonight in the case of the Colorado man who admitted to murdering his wife, his 2 daughters, and to causing the death of his unborn son. Chris Watts told police his family disappeared, but he eventually confessed to the killings. In return for a guilty plea, Watts avoided the death penalty. New tonight, police recordings of the defendant trying to explain what happened. In this first clip, he finally tells officers where to find the bodies of his children.
So it sounds like, it feels like to me, now we know pretty well how to go get them. Is there anything else we need to know? About how to get them? Yeah. Does someone have to climb up to the top and unscrew something and then lower something down to get them? They're like, it's just a hatch on the top, and they're like 20-foot tanks. How far down are they? Where the food level is in the tank, I'm not sure. Okay. What was it when you were there? I don't know. I didn't. Okay. I wasn't looking into that. Okay. All right. You may go out there or no? I don't think so. Would you prefer not to? I didn't know if you needed help getting there. Yeah, I don't know. I think once we got that picture, because we didn't really know how much about the location that the other police officers knew. But it sounds like they knew somehow right how to get to 319. So, and I think that's how they got that picture.
In this next clip, Chris Watts breaks down in tears and tells his own father his wife is the one who killed the children.
When you came in, was your wife on top of her right when you came in? So you saw it in person? Yes, I saw them on, and that's why I rushed in. So I went in there to talk to her again. And when you came in, she was right there on top of her? She was right there. Okay. Her hands on her throat? The 2. Are you trying to say it, Cece? It's hard to go and say. It's one of the movies. Her head's hanging over left like that.
Attorney Ross Kramer is our guest on the Debrief tonight to analyze this and a couple of other cases. So, Ross, good to see you again.
Yeah, you too.
All right. So, legally, this does not mean much from a criminal law standpoint because there's already been an admission, an acceptance of a guilty plea, and a sentence.
Well, that's true. But the release of this sheds a lot of color on what happened in terms of the investigation and how they came to take someone who was a suspect all the way through to getting a guilty plea here, taking the death penalty off the table, but resolving a really horrible case that would have put the legal system, judges, attorneys, family through, years of process.
An incredible ringer there, certainly. We want to have due process, but it would have been difficult for all involved. Is it possible that some of these recordings could play a role in the civil case that Shanann Watts' parents have filed against Chris Watts?
No, absolutely. They could be used as evidence, although I don't know that they say any more than what his guilty plea itself did under oath, where he admitted to all of these murders. But I think they also speak to the public, and the public's need to know and understand how such a horrific crime like this could play out.
Is it possible that this could play a role in damages, for instance? A judge in a civil case could look at some of this and turn around and say, okay, wait a minute, you're saying this whole story that she was involved, then you admitted it was you all along. Does that increase damages or not?
I suppose it's possible. The bottom line is that he stood up before a judge under oath, said that he committed the murders and caused the death of these people. I'm not sure that he has, from everything I've read, the kind of money that would make a difference here anyway. Not that money could ever make anyone whole, anyone's family whole in a case like this. But I don't know that these videos are going to make it any bigger an award than it would have been anyway.
Interesting insight. Well, let's move along here. A former police officer in Dallas is now under indictment for murder in the shooting death of a man sitting in his apartment. Amber Geiger fatally shot Botham Jean when she entered his apartment thinking it was really her own. A grand jury agreed with prosecutors that Geiger should be tried for murder, carrying a sentence of between 5 and 99 years in Texas. The Dallas police chief fired Geiger a few weeks after the shooting. Now to the case of an alleged cop cover-up in Chicago, Illinois. It all surrounds what happened in this video, which shows Chicago police officer Jason Van Dyke shooting and killing a knife-wielding teenager named Laquan McDonald. One jury convicted Officer Van Dyke of second-degree murder, but now 3 other officers are on trial. The 3 men are accused of conspiracy, official misconduct, and obstruction of justice. Prosecutors say they lied in their official reports by claiming Laquan McDonald attacked the officer who shot him. Each one of those 3 officers has a unique defense. Testimony in the case is scheduled to resume Tuesday of next week, but today on the Law and Crime Network, the attorney for the family of shooting victim Laquan McDonald said it's about time the police faced consequences. Here, that attorney talks about the settlement between the city and the McDonald family.
It's amazing that finally in Chicago, with the long history of the Code of Silence, it's finally being exposed. You have officers taking the witness stand, testifying against supervisors and detectives. And, you know, whether they're convicted or not is another question, but it's amazing that this case has finally come to this. And when you look at the false narrative that's in all the police reports, and there were 10 officers on the scene, there's not one officer that gave an honest account about what happened that night. And certainly when you compare it to the video, what you see in those police reports are just a complete fabrication and cover-up. We received the video, I think, in March or early April, and then immediately when we saw it, my partner and I were both former prosecutors here in Chicago, and it was just shocking. So we immediately called the city, told them we had the video, and would they like to discuss a prompt settlement. It had to be approved by the entire city council. The ultimate settlement was $5 million.
$5 million. The civil attorney for the victim's family also took a swipe at the officer who pulled the trigger in that video you just saw. And later, that attorney talked about the officer taking the stand in his own separate murder trial.
I think he had to take the stand. You know, typically in a murder case, if you can avoid having the defendant take the stand, you don't want him to. But in a case like this, high-profile shooting, he's a police officer, I think a jury had to hear from him and hear his explanation about why he fired his gun 16 times. That said, I think he was a horrible witness. I think he looked heavily medicated, poorly coached, and again, you cannot justify, once the man hits the ground, why did you keep on shooting? I thought the cross-examination by the special prosecutors was pretty good. They had him on the ropes a few times. You know, he kind of forced tears during the direct, but on the cross-examination, he became a little more defiant. And at the end of the day, you can't justify shooting someone who's on the ground, who's already been shot and not a threat to anyone.
Let's jump forward now to the case against the 3 officers who were accused of covering up what happened. An independent witness testified that he was ordered away from the scene, but later came forward and spoke out.
Well, the reason why I came forward was because the following morning, the day after the incident, I turned on the news. I wanted to see if there was anything on the news about the shooting. And when I heard the police spokesperson say that that he was lunging, that Laquan McDonald was lunging at the police, and when I found out that all he had was a knife, I told my wife at that moment, I'm like, they're lying. This is not what happened.
So what did you do next?
Well, I discussed it with my wife, and you know, she was kind of worried for me to step forward. I told her I had to say something because I can't. This is just like a burden on my shoulders, and it's eating away at me.
The state star witness in this case is Officer Dora Fontaine, who claims the 3 defendants twisted her words in their reports. Here she testified about what she saw when the shots rang out.
How did you know he had a knife?
He had a shiny object, and I've seen knives before.
And you say he was swaying a knife.
Yes,
And what do you mean by that?
swaying left to right.
Okay. As he was swaying this knife, could you see him clearly?
Yes,
Did you ever see him raise the knife up to his shoulder?
no,
Did you see him raise the knife above his chest?
no,
Did you see him attack anyone with the knife?
no,
Did you see him touch anyone with the knife?
no,
Did he hold the knife near or below his waist?
yes,
As you were getting out of your car, could you still see this individual known as Laquan McDonald?
yes.
Could you hear anything?
Dropped the knife and gunshots.
All right. Besides drop the knife and gunshots, did you see anything else?
Puffs of smoke.
Where were these puffs of smoke?
They were coming from the location of Laquan.
Did you know who was saying drop the knife?
No.
In this next clip, Officer Fontaine explained some of the words prosecutors say the defendants put in her mouth in subsequent police reports.
Did you ever observe Laquan McDonald raise his arm towards Officer Van Dyke?
No,
Did you ever observe Laquan McDonald raise his arm as if attacking Van Dyke?
no,
Did you make that statement to Defendant March?
no,
Is that statement false based on what you witnessed of the shooting?
Objection, Your Honor.
That calls for a conclusion, so
Yes.
that is sustained.
Did
Didn't interrupt your objection.
Did Defendant March ever give you an opportunity to review or revise this report before it was submitted?
No,
Objection is the answer.
that's overruled.
Attorney Ross Kramer is back with us tonight to talk about this case. Ross, let's start with this independent witness. This seems like basic, simple police work. If there are people on the scene who may have seen something, get a statement.
Well, unless you're a bunch of police officers who don't want witnesses to come forward and give their independent recollection, which seems like it was the case here. But yeah, I mean, as a criminal defense attorney, as a citizen, it was really heartening to see someone with no stake in the game to come forward here and give his unvarnished account of what he saw, even at the risk to himself of having to come out and testify at multiple trials.
Yeah, look, I mean, as a journalist who has been on crime scenes very, very early, I will admit I have seen this sort of police work before, where I'll go around and talk to witnesses who the police ignore.
Or the police send away.
Seriously, like I'm going to put them on TV.
Yeah, I mean, you'll see, I think in cases like this, the police were trying to shoo people away. I think that everyone knew from a very early stage, and I think the evidence is bearing this out, that this was not a good shooting. And I think the less witnesses that were there, the better. However, it's great to see that not only did independent witnesses come forward, but at the end of the day, police officers in the same precinct came up and gave very credible testimony about what happened and why they didn't believe the shooting was justified.
Okay, so the defense accuses Officer Fontaine, the key witness here, of being a liar out to protect her $90,000 a year job, her house, her camp up in the country in Michigan. What do you make of the attack?
I thought that this was the kind of attack that you would use as a last-ditch attack in a jury trial. If you have jurors there that may not understand why this police officer was testifying or how cross-examination works, testimony like that, cross-examination, may be useful. In front of a judge that's a very sophisticated finder of fact, I didn't think the theatrics and those kind of attacks were really useful and really scored any points for the defense here.
Ross Kramer, I appreciate your insight on the debrief tonight.
You got it.
All right, still ahead tonight here on the Daily Debrief. Updates in two high-profile criminal trials we're following for next week. One involves a billionaire, the other involves a Netflix film, Making a Murderer. Plus, how does this happen? A rapper is dominating the charts while behind bars on federal charges. Part two of the Debrief is after the break. Welcome back, everybody. A convicted Florida killer learned his official sentence today. Jurors handed down guilty verdicts against James Colley in July of murdering his wife and her friend. You might remember security camera video showing a survivor of his attack running from the crime scene. The victims who died were Amanda Colley and her friend Lindy Dobbins. Jurors recommended a death sentence after the original trial, and a judge today agreed by formally sending Colley to death row. President Trump's former campaign manager may be facing another trial. Paul Manafort appeared in federal court today to learn that he'll be sentenced next March, but prosecutors attached to the Office of Special Counsel Robert Mueller hinted they may seek to try him for lying in recent discussions with prosecutors. Manafort pleaded guilty earlier this year to 2 charges of conspiracy and witness tampering. He was separately found guilty in August on 8 counts of tax fraud, bank fraud, and hiding foreign bank accounts. We are following several new trials for the start of the new week here on Law and Crime. Billionaire financier Jeffrey Epstein is suing the attorney of a number of women who accused him of sexual abuse. The case, however, is expected to involve testimony from many of the alleged victims. Law and Crime has learned that Epstein's connections to Bill Clinton and Donald Trump will be discussed at the upcoming trial this coming week. Wisconsin attorney and municipal judge Len Kaczynski is scheduled to go on trial next Thursday, though a judge today issued an order limiting some witness testimony in the case. Kaczynski is accused of felony stalking and misdemeanor harassment regarding his treatment of a clerk. Kaczynski gained notoriety after his appearance in the Netflix film Making a Murderer, which chronicled his representation of Brendan Dassey, a teenager accused of murder. Let's pause to check some of the other criminal incidents making headlines with Anthony Velez.
Here are today's top crime stories trending on lawandcrime.com and across the country. Authorities in California are searching for one of 2 suspects caught on camera beating a woman outside of a bar. The suspects, James Curtis Falkenberry, who is wanted for separate felony assault charges stemming from another incident, and Juan Rojas, can be seen assaulting the woman identified as Audrey in front of the Stone Sports Bar and Lounge in Napa earlier this month. Rojas turned himself into authorities and is being held without bail. Falkenberry remains at large and is considered dangerous. 2 people are under arrest in Florida after authorities say they ran an illegal dental office out of a bright red bus. The pair, 37-year-old Daniela Solbaron and 44-year-old Victor Bernal, were busted earlier this month during an undercover sting operation in Miami into their alleged illegal dental practice. The pair allegedly had a fully operational dentist office in the bus and a cache of prescription drugs to assist with their procedures. The duo is now charged with practicing healthcare without a license. Marriott announced a massive breach of data of nearly 500 million customers who stayed at their hotels on or before September 10, 2018. The hotel giant determined there was unauthorized access to its Starwood guest authorization database, and the data of nearly 500 million guests was taken, including passport numbers and credit card information. Marriott reported the incident to the authorities, and an investigation is now active. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for the Daily Debrief.
It's Friday, folks, so it's time for a summary of the week's biggest celebrity legal issues. Jill Stanley is an attorney who tracks these matters. She joins us now on the Daily Debrief for a discussion about 2 such cases. Jill, how are things on the West Coast?
I am on the East Coast right now.
Oh, okay, you switched things up. Okay, well, let's start with Nicki Minaj and a $74,000 dispute over clothing, at least $74,000 under one version of the facts here, right?
Yeah, you know what, Nicki Minaj, of course, a New York favorite, and I am actually a big Nicki Minaj fan, but she has been very bumpy this fall. It has been a rough fall for her, legally speaking. So she was just sued by her stylist. Her stylist said, you didn't pay me for my time, and you didn't pay me for these $13,000 worth of clothes that I rented for you so that you could look really good at Paris Fashion Week. So he sued her for that. Nikki was like, yeah, I'm not going to say that exactly happened. And you know what? I overpaid you $12,000. You know I overpaid you $12,000. You said you would give me the money back, but you haven't. So I'm going to now countersue you. So it just shows you how angry she is about this because, quite frankly, I think her lawyer fees to fight this thing is going to be more than the $12,000. But that is how I think upset she is about a person on her own team going after her, and she's really disputed that that happens at all. So really kind of interesting because Nikki's in the middle of a lot of stuff going on. She was recently sued by Tracy Chapman, another singer, for a copyright violation. It was actually a song that wasn't even released, but apparently a radio station got hold of it, played it one time, Tracy found out and said, we're not going to do this, and sued Nikki for copyright infringement.
Oh,
Nikki,
so there's just all sorts of issues following her everywhere, it seems. I mean, you know, perhaps she needs to beef up her legal team.
Yeah, she might need to beef up her legal team. She's got another copyright case. She has a breach of contract case. I mean, she had the fight with Cardi B at the Met Gala. So there's just a lot of stuff going on with her right now. So I think she needs a little legal advice. If you know any good lawyers out there who can help Nikki, you know, she needs a little.
Could be. Okay, so now let's move on to this next one here. We're back to rapper Tekashi 6ix9ine. We talked about him a couple of weeks ago. He's back in trouble now this time. So what's new with him?
Very, very, very significant trouble. As you might recall, Aaron, what I said erroneously at the end of our last chat about Tekashi 6ix9ine was that I hope he was going to start walking the straight and narrow, because that's what he said he was going to do. Now, and maybe he has, because all of the allegations that are being held against him right now happened prior to our conversation. Mm-hmm. But here's the big deal. He was charged in a more than 17-count indictment, a federal indictment for racketeering and weapons charges. He was denied bail. Tekashi 6ix9ine is sitting in a federal jail and will do so until September 2019, when his trial is scheduled to occur.
Okay, so, I mean, if you're a rap artist, I mean, does this actually help your record sales? One would think that if one wants to have a persona as a bad guy, then maybe somehow this is going to help. And is that indeed what happened?
You know, I wouldn't say it that way, actually. And I know it's getting a lot of coverage that he released his album last week while he was incarcerated. And I think 4 of the songs shot to the top of the list, the Billboard list of top songs released for the week. And so, yeah, that's a nice, like, big bang, for lack of a better term, if you will, for, you know, his fans. But the truth is, he is facing 32 years to life. This is so serious.
Yeah, that's serious.
Yeah, I mean, this is not his other charges. He had an interesting charge out of New York using a child in a sexual performance, but he got probation for that. His other charges were kind of little light assault charges, and he pled them all out, and that's all kind of well and good. That was not so significant. This is very significant because he's really being associated with some very, very serious violent gang instances in New York. His own life was at risk. He's actually had issues while he's in prison as well. I mean, they have already had to move him because his life is in danger.
Exactly.
So it might sound like a really good story, and I know it's getting so much coverage that his album's doing so well. But you know what? That can help pay the bills if his assets aren't frozen.
It can, Jill. Hey, we got to wrap up for the day, so we'll see you next Friday here on the Debrief. And, of course, we will remind you that our live coverage begins on Monday at 9 a.m. of trials around the country. I'll see you back here on the Debrief as well. Have a good weekend.